Good evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Let's begin with news that authorities have confirmed another Covid-19 case. A 39-year-old woman from China is said to be linked to two others who are being treated for the virus. Now, this brings the number of confirmed cases in Malaysia to 19.
Yeah, I know, Melissa, again, the expectation that there might be a peak and then a plateau, maybe a fall off in terms of infections, gets complicated. When you start reading the news about how China's hospitals are dealing with the whole diagnostic level of it, meaning trying to figure out if people actually are infected with the virus. It's actually quite complicated. Different countries have different, sort of strategies.
Right.
And one of the things that has come out in the media recently is the question of using X-rays of the chest. But I mean, I'm not getting into the
technicals of it.
Yep. Yeah, but it's really interesting kind of from an abstract point of view. The way in which the scientific community is dealing with this disease. On a less abstract, on one other level, of course, it's just the sheer number of people who have died. And who are they? I mean, I don't think we're learning enough from the media about who they are as people, and that, I think, is something that perhaps might come in time.
Well, okay, we also have news that the International Islamic University of Malaysia, or IIUM, has postponed all classes at its Gombak campus for 10 days. This is as a preemptive measure in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. I think University of Malaya has also come out to say that they are also suspending face-to-face teaching activities for 1 week. This is beginning February 17th.
Yeah, the question is, are these closures a decision that's being made on a very local level by those institutions, or is it part of some sort of broader SOP for other institutions to follow?
I'm quite curious. Okay, so the IIUM has mentioned in their Facebook page that they've denied an outbreak of the virus on the campus. But I think it's quite interesting to your point, Sharaad, about the SOP. So some universities have called for, postponing all kind of face-to-face lectures, but who's calling the shots on that? Are they doing that in consultation with the Ministry of Health? What about, workplaces? Should workplaces also be looking at perhaps postponing, or who would call the shots for workplaces to be people from working from home, perhaps, or schools, for instance?
Yeah, but the question also is that if this was applied in a kind of universal fashion, are we looking really at the shutdown of the entire economy, right? So then the question is, and is that even necessary? I mean, if a shutdown of the entire economy is necessitated,
it's just a preemptive measure, right?
Right. So then I think it's really about what we understand about the disease, why it's so infectious, how it's transmitted, and what is likely to be the scenario going forward. Well, I mean, none of these questions really, in many ways, have been, adequately answered.
Well, there was also another interesting story to do with the COVID-19 outbreak. A Malaysian student in Perth, Australia, was evicted by her landlord upon her return from celebrating Chinese New Year in Malaysia. This was over fears that she would be carrying the coronavirus. Now, according to a report by the Australia Broadcast Corporation, the student was locked out of her apartment at 4 a.m. Despite the fact that she had not travelled to China. She came back to Malaysia for Chinese New Year. The locks were changed with a note warning, no trespassing, house in lockdown due to coronavirus.
Yeah, again, we come back to some of the home truths.
Fear, right? It's the fear of this disease,
loathing, racism, all these things kind of, collapsing into one another and providing an opportunity at this point in time to be acted upon by some people. The question is, of course, do we take this one case in isolation against the many, many instances where people are welcomed, people are protected, the community stand with them, so on and so forth. So, perhaps not to tar an entire nation with this
one landlord's knee-jerk reaction.
Absolutely.
All right, well, now we would also like to highlight tonight a special investigative report by Malaysiakini today on institutionalized corruption in the Road Transport Department, or JPJ. Now, this report contains testimony of monthly payments being made by logistic companies to enforcement officers and ad hoc bribes when their lorries run into trouble at roadblocks. Now, one company had paid some 235,000 ringgit in bribes to JPJ officers in 2018, and this is an average of 20,000 ringgit per month. these bribes paid out amount to nearly 30% of the company's yearly expenses. I have to say, in this corrupt system, law-abiding companies are often subjected to harassment. So over time, both logistics companies and the JPJ become part of an institutionalized corruption racket.
Yeah.
Really fascinating report. I encourage everyone to read it.
Yeah, and I think, Malaysiakini is doing what many other media perhaps should do more of, which is that investigative work. And sometimes getting that initial story is not so difficult because in many ways, we are almost everyone knows how corruption works, and it works in different ways in different places, right? The problem is getting somebody to speak to the media, right?
Yes,
and as we put
agree.
their names to it, I'll give details that, in fact, would implicate them because when you say that you've paid a bribe, the question is, what are the legal implications to yourself, right? Though you might be saying it in order to stop the ongoing practice of corruption, there might be legal implications for you. But without those people standing up and being counted, how do we move forward? How do we, in fact, get the bad guys?
Right. Well, and I have to point out as well that JPJ said it was preparing to take disciplinary action and even cut jobs if anyone was found guilty of graft. So now, following this expose, JPJ has now decided to look inside, to look at its department and see whether there is institutionalized corruption. So this is a great example of speaking up, speaking to the media, investigative journalism having a result.
Yeah, and because there's always the need for follow-up in Malaysia, as there is in any other context, which is that often institutions will put out the statement saying we're going to do this and that, and we're going to act against those who are corrupt. What we need to find out is has that actually happened? Remember now, the Wan Kalian issue, right? So how many people have actually paid the price for those horrible deaths in the death camps in Wan Kalian? Many years later, we know in Thailand, dozens of officials, high-ranking officials, were held accountable. In Malaysia, very few. In fact, I believe they only reported 4, and they were all non-Malaysian. So the question is, there are all these people running around, potentially
what happens to them, right?
What has happened to them, and what happens to cases against them?
Well, as part of this special report, I think Malaysiakini also looked at what happens to corrupt officials. Now, apparently, it's a tedious and procedurally laborious process to dismiss an officer, and those who are charged in court would normally be transferred to a desk job, but remain as part of the department. And I'm wondering, Sharaad, does this all add to the feeling of the public sentiment that perhaps no amount of investigative reporting, no amount of whistleblowing will change an institutionally corrupt system?
Well, I mean, people might get dismayed, but the question, of course, is that what are the processes? Now, if there's a weakness in the law that allows corrupt officials to remain within the system, and more importantly, remain and continue with those corrupt practices, then what we need are stronger laws or bylaws or procedures that, in fact, allow government departments to get rid of those corrupt individuals. There might also be, and we need to be more careful in reporting this stuff, so people who are put on a desk job might not have been core to that corrupt practice, right? So maybe a rap on the hands, on the knuckles, as it were, or and a close watch over them might be all that is necessary. It's very hard to say, but we need the deep dive by journalists to get the clarity we need.
Kudos to the Malaysiakini team. We're going to take a quick break right here on Consider This, and after this, take a closer look at the governance of art institutions here in Malaysia. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.